Go ahead.
Thank you. Your Honor, we are calling a witness now. We are supposed to be advising the court the stipulation of the parties. Sorry, I have a broken chair I'm dealing with. What our stipulations are with respect to going through all the triple I's. We had indicated previous in this case that the parties had looked at the triple I's or records of all witnesses. This witness, it is the state's understanding, Mr. Saunders kind of looked at it and believes that she has one prior conviction, so we have advised her that she can be asked if she has ever previously been convicted of a crime and how many times, and her answer would be one.
Yes, Your Honor, I know the next witness being called. I did have a chance to look at the triple I's at the DA's office, and I would concur that it would be only one prior.
All right. You've been adjourned. Be seated. State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Kelly Walters to the stand.
And would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Kind of tricky at times. You may have to adjust it during the course of your testimony. Then you have to, actually, I'm going to speak over the microphone, pull it that close.
Okay.
So that the microphone almost gets the sound from under the visor.
Okay.
Would you first state your name and then spell it for us?
It's Kelly Walters, and it's Kelly, and it's Walters.
Now, Ms. Walters, how old are you?
42.
And do you have any children?
Yes.
How old are they?
They go from 26 to 20.
Okay. Now, Ms. Walters, do you know an individual by the name of Wesley Edges?
Yes.
How do you know Wes?
I met Wes after we had moved in to the trailer park there in Pulaski, and we became really, really close when my kids got hurt.
Okay. Now, when you indicate you became really, really close when your kids got hurt, what do you mean by that?
My kids two of my children were electrocuted and burned by a power line in our backyard in 2011. Wes, having already had that, we became a whole lot closer, all of us as a family.
Sure. And that was just an inadvertent accident, what had happened to your children?
Yes.
And you were familiar with Wes having also suffered burns over his body in an incident?
Yes.
So with respect to when you indicate you became really, really close, approximately how many years have you known Wes?
If I went back, I'd say probably 2008 or 9.
Okay.
And the kids got hurt in 11.
Okay. That would make sense. You knew him for a few years before that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you've known him approximately 12 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you indicate that you got really close, did Wes become somewhat of a mentor with respect to your kids and the burns that they had?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
And when you indicate that he was a friend of your family, and I'm looking back to time frame of 2013, were you spending time with Wes? Was your family spending time with him back then?
Yes.
And were there times that he would come over to your house?
Yes.
Did he ever stay over at your house?
Yeah, sometimes 3, 4, or 5 days at a time.
Would you watch television with them?
We would watch movies, we would do stuff with the kids, yeah.
Okay. And at that time, back in 2013, were you married?
In 13, I was already divorced.
Okay. And had you been in a relationship with someone by the name of Jerry?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to Thursday evening of April 25th of 2013, which, for a point of reference, orients you. That would have been the evening that Victoria Prokopovitz then reported being missing. Do you recall that night?
I do, because they asked numerous times, you know, about it.
Okay. And when you say they, who are you talking about?
Just after everything happened, you had the detectives that asked, you had, you know, officers that asked.
So officers approached you?
Yes.
And at the time, at some point, are you made aware of who Wes's mother is? That
Yes.
she's Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
And at some point, are you made aware that she's missing?
Yes.
With respect to being a friend of Wes and spending time to him, did he also confide in you about things in his life?
Yes, yeah, we had more heart-to-heart talks.
Yeah. Was there a more serious, deep side to Wes?
Oh, yes.
And would you, with respect to that, would you and he have discussions about things relating to life?
Yes.
Now, before I get into that, I'm going to back you up. On that Thursday evening, did you have cause to see Wes that night?
It might have been one of the nights that he just came over to hang out.
Okay. Do you remember specifically talking to law enforcement that the night that Victoria went missing, that Wes had been on your house that evening?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall if you told officers you thought it was sometime between 7 and 9 at that night that he came over? Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. So do you remember, had you guys already eaten dinner by the time he would have come over?
I think I might have been feeding the kids that night while they were watching, you know, our weekly little family night. We had a little, you know, family night.
Do you remember telling law enforcement what you thought you guys were watching?
To leading.
Yes.
Well, overrule, I think the question was, do you remember telling law enforcement officer what you were doing? I won't find that as leading, so overruled.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So on that evening, do you remember telling law enforcement what you believed you were doing?
Yes.
What were you doing?
Wes came that night between probably 7 and 9, which Thursday nights, as I said, the kids and I had a routine. They enjoyed wrestling. It gave them something, you know, to do and occupy time, and it was on every Thursday night at that point in time.
Was that Spike TV?
It might have been, yes. It changes every so often channels, but it might have been Spike at the time.
Okay. So at that point in the evening, do you remember you said that you were watching it with your kids and Wes? Is that right? Mm-hmm. Was Jerry there initially, and then he went to bed?
Yeah, yes. He may have been.
Okay. Do you remember giving a statement to law enforcement about Jerry went to bed a few hours later?
Yeah, he might not have been there at the time Wes arrived, but he was still living at the house, so
Okay.
he was there during the night.
And I'm taking you back to 2013 and it's 2021?
Yes,
Okay. But Wes was there and he was watching television with you. At some point, did the kids go to bed?
yeah, they would have.
Okay. And at some point, do you recall who's up watching television after Jerry goes to bed and the kids?
Well, that would have been just Wes and I at the house.
All right. And do you have, where do you watch TV? The living room?
Would have been the living room.
Okay. And so it was just you and Wes then for a while. Do you remember what you were watching then?
We probably flipped a movie on, or we watched something on the computer. We had all kinds of stuff that we would watch from the computer. A lot of times when he was there, we would watch just movies and, you know, just basic, let's hang out and have that time together.
Yeah. And again, then that's just kind of the norm for what you do. And at some point, do you recall that if Wes left your house that evening?
He did leave the house that night, yes.
Do you remember what time of night that was?
Initially, I thought it was around 4 a.m. That may have been the time that I went to bed. After I did, you know, think about it a little bit, he left no later than probably 1:30 that morning.
Okay. So he was there, from what you recall, after midnight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's information that when officers approached you, you passed along to them?
Yes.
And do you recall where he went after he left you?
He went to another friend's house.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Cross?
Now, Ms. Walters, what time did Wes show up at your house that evening?
It would have been probably between 7 and 9.
Between 7 and 9? You don't know any more specific than that?
Nope, there's a 2-hour window when the show would have been on. That's the time it ran from, so it was between that time when he showed up.
Do you know if the show was already on when he showed up?
It may have been on.
And you watched a 2-hour program, did you say it was on Spike TV? Did you say,
Yes.
What'd you say the show was? I'm sorry.
We were watching Thursday Night SmackDown. It was
Okay.
something we did as a family.
All right. And then after that, the kids went to bed, and you started watching, but you don't recall whether you're watching a program on a computer or a movie, correct?
It could have been a show that came on after that, but normally we watched movies and that.
And you initially thought that Wes left around 4 a.m. Why did you think that?
That was probably the time that I actually went to bed.
When did you clarify that he left earlier than that?
That I don't know for sure, at which point I clarified.
You initially told officers that you thought he left at 4 a.m., and then was it another interview that you had that you told them that he left earlier than that?
I may have talked to them once after that, yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, you had no contact with Victoria Prokopovitz, true?
A couple of times over at Wes's house.
Okay. Do you know when those contacts occurred?
It would have been during summer because she was out cleaning up the yard and planting her flowers and doing all of her outside stuff.
Do you know what year that was?
Well, I knew Wes for a couple of years, so I had met his mother a couple of times over
Okay.
those couple of years.
Do you recall seeing his mother in 2013 at all?
That I can't tell you for sure.
And you think maybe in the summer of 2012 you saw her?
I can't clarify for sure.
And then you think that he left around 1:30 from your home on the night of the, well, I guess it'd be the morning of the 26th of 2013, correct?
Yes,
And then you went to another friend's house.
yes.
How far away do you live from the house on 5118 Coonish Road? Where was your house located at that time?
A few miles from there.
Okay. So you lived in the Pittsfield area?
Yeah, I was technically in South Chase,
South Chase?
right there, yes.
Okay. And Wes drove there with a truck?
I'm sure he had a truck where he had the blazer type thing at that point, I think, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you, you're excused. You can stand up and stretch if you wish. You may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Monica Yankee to the stand.
come right up by the witness stand here. Happy? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. Then you may have to adjust the microphone right. Very good. You're well versed apparently in the difficulties of these masks and the visors and the microphones. Would you kindly state and then spell your name?
Monica Yankee, Janke.
Ms. Yankee, are you presently employed?
No.
Are you retired?
Yes.
And where were you previously employed?
With the Brown County Sheriff's Office,
And how long were you employed with the Brown County Sheriff's Department?
30 years.
How were you employed? What was your position there?
When I retired, I was a detective sergeant.
Okay. And so you were a law enforcement officer there for over 30 years?
Yes.
Had you worked with a different law enforcement agency previous to that employment?
No.
In the course of your role, and you indicated you were a detective sergeant when you retired?
Yes.
Previous to that, had you been a patrol officer?
Yes.
In all the 30 years that you were working as a law enforcement officer, did you have training and experience with respect to investigating criminal instances of conduct?
I did.
And on occasions, did those include physical assaults as well as cases up to homicides?
Yes.
When you were a detective sergeant in the investigative division at the Brown County Sheriff's Department, did you work alongside your colleagues collectively gaining evidence on cases?
I did.
Were you sometimes assigned as the case agent?
Yes.
And other times did you assist your colleagues in their investigations?
Yes.
Do you also have training and experience with respect to executing search warrants of property
I do.
and taking items of evidence into custody?
Yes.
Now, specifically working at the Sheriff's Department, did you have cause to work with Detective Sergeant Roman Ehrenstein?
Yes, I did.
And at some point in 2015, did he have cause to ask you to assist him in the investigation involving the disappearance of a Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes, he did.
I'd like to direct your attention specifically to April 29th of 2015. Did you have cause to respond to 5118 Coonish Road in the town of Pittsfield, Brown County, Wisconsin, in reference to something?
Yes, we were going to execute a search warrant that day.
Now, in working with Detective Ehrenstein, at the time that you're executing this search warrant, have you already had discussions about the facts and circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
So with respect to going into this residence now, whose residence was this identified as to you?
Jim Prokopovitz and Wesley Prokopovitz were living at the residence at the time of the search warrant.
And now you're doing this 2 years after her alleged disappearance?
Yes.
At the time that you respond, okay. At the time that you are responding, you're aware that this investigation has already been ongoing in your department, is that right?
Yes.
And when a search warrant is executed, are there photographs that are sometimes taken of items?
Yes, there are.
And with regard to that, is that to memorialize the condition of something at the time you see it?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 84. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
That's the bed in James Prokopovitz's bedroom, presumably. That
So-
was the room that we were advised was James' bedroom.
And that that was the bed you were advised belonged to James Prokopovitz?
Yes.
Okay. And you took a photograph of that?
I believe Linnea Haney, who was a sergeant at the time, was doing the photography, or somebody from the state crime lab.
And you were present with her?
Yes.
All right. Does that picture appear to memorialize what you saw as the condition of the bed on that date?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would move for the admission of Exhibit 84 and ask that it be published to the jury.
Objection, Your Honor.
84 is admitted. You may publish.
I think I lost my publisher for a moment, Your Honor, so I'm just going to wait a minute until Mr. Saunders the bed. Now, Ms. Haney, at the time, or strike that, Ms. Yankee, at the time that you are at this residence, there are other officers there as well assisting you?
Yes.
Was there, oh, if I can have a moment, Your Honor. We're going to reserve our right to publish that when the smart board's up, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Yankee, on that date, had you been made aware that there had been a relationship between Jim Prokopovitz and a female party identified as Kathy Friday?
Yes.
Were you advised that was a romantic relationship?
Yes.
Had you been previously advised that, strike that. At the time that you are executing this search warrant, is there anything significant that you find near the bedroom of Mr. Prokopovitz?
There were a number of items that we located that were photographed, and I believe Sergeant Haney collected some items. There was also, there was at least one pornographic image that we located next to the bed or near the bed.
Now, we're not going to publish that, but if you could describe for the jury, what did it appear that photograph was that was located by the bed?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the relevance of this. It doesn't have anything to do with a missing person, nor does it have any relevance to this case.
It actually specifically addresses a co-conspirator in the case that is charged, and it goes to the obsessive relationship that the state is already, it's in evidence everywhere.
Overruled. You
Thank
may
you.
answer.
Thank you. What was located? Was there a photograph, did you indicate, was located by the bed?
Yes.
I think you said pornographic, is that
Yes.
right?
It was a pornographic image of Kathy Friday,
Okay. And what area of her body was that?
her vagina.
Okay. So that was something that was taken into evidence at that time?
I don't recall whether it was taken or not.
Okay. If some of your colleagues have that, and we're not going to publish that today, but the information was that that was an image belonging to Kathy Friday that Mr. Prokopovitz had?
I had met Kathy Friday, so I was able to identify her in the photo.
Okay. Now, at the time that the search warrant is executed at this residence, was there various things that were examined throughout the residence?
Yes.
And at the time, was there, do you recall, some blood splatters that were identified?
The luminol picked up some blood in, I think, 3 areas of the house.
And what is luminol?
Luminol is a substance that's sprayed. It's used on that day by the Wisconsin Crime Lab, and it's a substance that reacts with the iron from hemoglobin, so it can pick up trace amounts of blood.
Now, with regard to you indicating the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, I guess I hadn't asked that. At the time that you're executing the search warrant, Are there other officers with the Brown County Sheriff's Department with you?
Yes,
Were there members of the Wisconsin State Crime Lab that responded as well?
yes,
So the jury understands the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, is that a division that your department typically use in assisting you in collection of evidence?
it depends on the situation, but if we have a larger area that we're gonna be examining, it's not unusual for us to call the State Crime Lab to assist.
Now, when you're indicating that there had been some blood splatters that had been identified, was that information turned over to Officer Ehrenstein?
Yes,
And anything relevant with respect to those findings, that would have been something he would follow up on then?
yes,
With regard to that, however, you are searching this residence 2 years after the fact, is that correct?
correct.
So the remoteness of that could have affected the evidentiary value?
I would presume because the crime lab had decided to use luminol that it was still a viable option in searching.
Okay. And with respect to that, then your role in this investigation, was that primarily how you had assisted on that date?
Yes,
I have nothing further.
Cross?
Now, Ms. Yankee, you did this search in 2015, correct?
correct.
And as part of that search, let's start with the blood splatters. Where did the blood splatters, were they really located in the house?
I don't know that they were splatters, but the luminol illuminated some, it kind of shines. And that would have been in the master bedroom or James' bedroom.
So that's, were these like blood droplets, do you recall?
I don't recall. But there
Wasn't
were-
a lot of blood, true?
I don't recall the area. I was assisting the crime lab in preparing areas. So when they were using the luminol and spraying it, I wasn't necessarily right with them when they discovered a detection.
Were you aware of Ms. Prokopovitz's propensity of having bloody noses?
I believe James had told me that day that she had bleeding because of cancer treatment and surgery.
And then that was going to be my next question is that you were aware that she did have cancer surgery, she had a colostomy bag, so it wouldn't be surprising to see some blood droplets in a bedroom where she stayed.
I don't know that he told us where that occurred. He just had mentioned the,
And as far as the part of getting a search warrant is to document it. Sure. As part of the investigation, getting a search warrant to do the luminol, that's just part of standard procedure.
you mean using luminol?
You mentioned there was a search warrant. Was that just a typical standard procedure that you have to get a search warrant, or can you just get consent from the homeowner?
In order to search a residence or anything, any property, you can either obtain consent to search or you can obtain a search warrant if you don't have consent.
To the best of your knowledge, did Mr. Prokopovitz ever deny access to his home to the police?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Any search that you guys wanted, he pretty much said, go ahead and do it?
I was involved in that search.
Okay. The photos that you found, the graphic photos, do you know when those were taken?
I have no idea.
Okay, you just found them, so you don't know if they were taken before or after Vicky went missing?
No, it appeared that she was approximately the same age, so I can identify the fact that they weren't taken years prior. So So the Kathy Friday that I met, she was the Kathy Friday in the image, approximately the same age.
Okay. When did you meet Kathy Friday?
I don't recall, sometime during the investigation.
Was it 2014 or 2015?
I honestly don't recall.
Did your part of the investigation rule out potential suicide?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No.
Thank you, then you're excused. Jury, you welcome to stand up and stretch. Shade may call the next witness.
At this time, the state would call Sarah Youngs to the stand.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Then would you pull way up to the microphone? You almost have to have the microphone below your visor so we can pick up the sound if you get real close. All right, get up a little bit in your chair. And then we just state and then spell your name, please.
Sarah Youngs, Sarahyoungs.
Ms. Youngs, how old are you?
40.
And are you familiar with an individual by the name of Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
How were you familiar with Victoria?
I was friends with her and used to work with her.
Where'd you used to work with her?
Super Rounds,
And Super Ron's, where is that located?
Plasky.
Okay. And the village of Pulaski, that's located in the Brown County, Wisconsin?
Correct.
Okay. Now, is that how you met Victoria when you were working together at Super Ron's? Do you remember?
Don't really remember her. I believe so, but I'm not really sure.
Okay. But at some point, the two of you were both employees there, is that right?
Yes.
And when you say that you were friends with Victoria, would you sometimes do things with Victoria outside of work?
Yeah, every now and then, yep.
Would you talk to her on the phone?
Yes.
And what sort of things do you recall that you talked to Victoria about?
Work stuff or life, mostly my life. Just basic stuff.
And at some point, did Victoria stop working at Super Ron's?
Yes.
Now, did that appear to have happened somewhere around 2006, 2007?
I believe so, yes.
And The contact you said that you had with Victoria, now you had contact with her at Super Ron's, I'm presuming, when you were working?
I'm sorry,
Sure. At Super Ron's, and I'm sorry, I don't know the layout of that, is there a particular department that you used to work in?
the deli,
Okay, and where did Victoria work?
in the deli.
So when you're working in the deli with her, were there more than 2 people working in the deli?
2 to 3
Okay.
at night, yeah.
So were you generally working night shift?
At that time, yeah.
And would that be something that, when you're indicating 2 or 3, sometimes just the 2 of you were the only ones working there?
I think so. I can't really remember at the time.
Sure. But sometimes there'd be that 3rd person?
Yeah.
Now, I'm taking you back to April of 2013. At some point, are you made aware that Victoria had disappeared?
Yes.
During the time frame that you were working with Victoria, and again, dating that to her leaving that employment somewhere in 06, 2007, after she left Super Runs, were you still working there?
Yes.
And did you have cause to see her through the years, from 2007 until 2013 when she disappeared?
We still talked, yeah.
Would you sometimes get together?
I think I went over there a couple times, yes.
When we're talking about go over there, do you remember which house she was living at?
I believe she was at the Pittsville house. I'm not really positive about that.
When you talk about that, is that the Coonish Road address?
Yes.
Now, when you're talking about that residence, at some point, had you gone over and picked Victoria up and given her rides?
No.
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 Would you ever go driving with Victoria
Yes.
through the years? Okay.
Yeah.
And who would be the person driving?
Vicky?
And at some point, were you aware of her losing her car?
No.
Okay. You never heard about her not having a car for a couple years?
No.
Okay. Would you talk to Victoria on the phone?
Yes.
In the time frame prior to Vicky going missing, did you start to see her less?
Yes.
Did you start to talk to her on the phone less?
There would be time periods where we wouldn't talk for like months, here and there, yeah.
Now, a couple of months before Victoria went missing, do you remember a time that Victoria left you a voicemail?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know, did that happen prior to her disappearance?
Yes, it was right before she disappeared, I believe.
And do you remember the content of that voicemail?
It was just saying, "This is Vicky, give me a call when you get a chance."
Okay. And around the time that Victoria disappeared and through the years, was Victoria married?
Yes.
Do you remember who she was married to?
Jim Prokopovitz?
Okay. And did Victoria ever talk to you about her relationship with Jim?
No, no.
Do you remember her ever complaining about anything?
The only thing I can think of is, that he drank a lot, was out at the bars a lot.
Okay. But did you ever really see him?
Not very often, no.
Right. And as far as what you were aware of with respect to Victoria, prior to her disappearance, did she appear to stay home a lot?
Yeah, yes.
In the year prior to her disappearance, would it be more unusual to hear that she was going out?
I don't believe she left her house very often.
Okay. You were aware she was at her house most of the time?
Yes.
At some point before she disappeared, did you receive information that Victoria was concerned about Jim having an affair with somebody?
I think she told me that, but I'm not positive if I heard that from her or from somebody else.
Okay. And when you met, at some point, did you meet with law enforcement?
I was subpoenaed by law enforcement.
Do you remember having a telephone
Oh, yes, I
call
have.
with law
I
enforcement?
did, yes, correct.
And at that time, do you recall indicating that Victoria, you received information that Victoria
Your Honor, I'm
believed
going
Jim was
to
having an
object to
affair?
leading. She doesn't recall the information, so this is a leading question.
Sustained.
Thank you. If there was a recording of that call, would that refresh your recollection?
Maybe, yes.
What? I'm sorry.
Maybe.
Okay. But you do recalling talking to law enforcement officers about it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you spoke to Vicki, did she speak about her family and her relationship with her family members?
Not very often.
Did she ever talk about her grandkids?
Here and there.
Did she indicate that she had loved her kids?
But, excuse me, that you,
Did she indicate to you that she loved her
Honor,
kids?
again, I'm going to object to leading.
Sustained.
Thank you. When you talked to Vicki, did she ever say anything about her grandkids?
yes. Here and there.
What?
Yes, here and there. She talked about them.
Okay, did she ever talk to you about her feelings towards them?
Yes.
Did she indicate whether she loved them?
Yes.
Now, with your relationship with Victoria and your perceptions of her, would it be unusual to think she would take off without saying someone to anyone?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
He's been asking about speculation all day, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain.
Okay. Thank you. At the time that you're having contact with Victoria, you indicate that the two of you were friends, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So when you indicated that she would also talk to you about her relationship with Jim, besides the drinking, do you recall her indicating any other concerns she had with Jim or his conduct?
No, I don't recall anything, no.
And everything that you would have indicated, you told officers when you spoke to them on the phone?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Ross.
Ms. Youngs, what years did you work with Vicki at Super Runs?
I believe from 2006, somewhere in there, maybe until 2007,
So only about 2 years,
maybe a year.
maybe a year. And you mentioned in your testimony that you primarily talked about your own personal life, correct?
Most of the time, yeah.
For the most part, Vicki didn't really talk about her home life much.
Not much, just mostly about how she was, like, she didn't feel good a lot of the times, just her personal, just stuff like that.
Did she ever talk about depression or anything of that nature?
Sometimes, yeah.
Did she ever talk about her medications that she's on?
No.
And the times that you would go to her house, are you sure it was the Pittsfield address or the Pulaski address?
I've been to both.
You've been to both. Do you know the last time you were at the Pittsfield address?
Oh, I don't know, no.
Would you say it was more than a year prior to her going missing?
Maybe, yeah.
And then do you recall the last time you actually talked to Victoria prior to her going missing?
Probably like 3 or 4 months before that.
She give you any indication of how she was feeling or doing?
She was happy. She was, life was going good. She was feeling good. She said she had a surgery done or something. She was feeling good. So.
And when she talked about Jim's drinking, was that more when you guys were working, or did she talk about it after she retired?
It was like when we were working.
So that 2006, 2007 time she was concerned about Jim's drinking?
It was just kind of brought up, it wasn't like an all-time thing. It was just like he drinks a lot type of thing, It wasn't brought up all the time,
When she said that he drank a lot, did she give you the impression of what that meant? Was that like he had a six-pack, or was it like he always had a beer every night kind of thing?
No, just that he was at the bars a lot, that's all.
Did she give you a time frame when he was always at the bars?
No.
And then when you go over to the home, did you see Jim interact with Victoria at all?
I don't remember. I know he was there, but he was always, I believe, in a different room. I don't remember ever really seeing him, maybe.
Did Victoria ever give the impression that she was afraid of Jim?
No,
Did she ever give you the impression that he was physically abusive to her?
no.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You direct?
No.
Thank you. You're excused.
Thank you.
You stand up and stretch. State may get their next witness ready.
The state will be calling Tyler Behling, Your Honor.
We did add the detention court in, so if you have to bring it up, there's now room to bring it up. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
You may have to pull up far enough where your visor actually gets over the microphone. Would you state and then kindly spell your name?
Tyler Behling. Last name is spelled Behling.
You may examine your witness.
Thank you. Mr. Behling, how are you presently employed?
I am an advanced computer forensic analyst at the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been employed with the Sheriff's Office?
Since November of 2014.
And is the entirety of that time as a forensic analyst?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you describe what your job responsibilities are?
My primary role at the Sheriff's Office is to examine and analyze digital evidence items, cell phones, computers, any type of digital record.
And what do you mean by examine?
Perform advanced forensic analysis on different computer devices. You know, it's kind of case dependent on what type of data we're looking at.
And could you describe your educational background, which qualifies you for this position?
I have an associate's degree in computer networking. I have specialized training, vendor-specific training for different forensic softwares. I have taken courses at the National Computer Forensic Institute. I have training through the FBI as well as the Secret Service and Homeland Security.
And that training that you outlined, what sort of areas, I guess, have you received training in?
I have training specific to mobile forensics, including cell phones and tablet devices. I have training specific to computer forensic on the Windows side as well as the Mac side. I have training in analyzing cell phone records. I have training in analyzing, you know, digital records from different social media platforms.
And with respect to, you said analyzing cell phone records, is that right?
That's correct.
And can you describe that process?
The process of analyzing a cell phone record?
Yes.
Well, at its base, cell phones need to have a communication with the cellular infrastructure, specifically a cell phone tower, in order to place a call or receive or transmit any type of data. Being that they need to communicate with a physical tower, you can essentially plot out or use geolocation data to determine where a cell phone would be during an active call.
So this is an area that you've received training with respect to conducting these analyses?
Yeah, I have basic training within cell phone investigations as well as a vendor-specific training in the software that's utilized to perform the analysis.
Okay. And with respect to the process of a cell phone that makes a call connecting to a cell tower, can you walk us through how that process unfolds?
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. So when a phone call is made on a cell phone, does it connect with the cell phone tower?
Yes, it does.
And is that information that the cell phone provider is able to track and log?
Yeah, they retain that data for a period of time.
Okay. And I guess how does it determine which cell tower a phone call goes to on any given call?
A cell phone at its base level is going to communicate with whatever tower it has the strongest connection to. That's not always the tower that's geographically closest. There's a lot of factors that kind of play into what tower you're going to have the strongest signal to. Geography, weather can even impact that. You know, any type of buildings or any kind of obstruction between a cell phone and a tower.
Okay. And with respect to the information coming from those cell towers, are you able to determine an approximate coordinate of where the phone call occurs?
Yes, because the way that the phone actually communicates with the tower, it communicates with a sector of that tower. Each tower is split up into 3 separate sectors that each cover about a 120-degree span. With data that we receive from the cell phone provider, as well as the information about their infrastructure and the placement of their towers and how those towers are laid out, we're able to determine geographically what direction someone would be from that tower.
Okay. So you're able to essentially get a general area or direction where that phone call is coming from in relation to the cell tower?
That is correct.
But it wouldn't be as exact as, say, a ping, or where you're precisely identifying the location of a phone call.
No, it's not nearly as accurate as like a GPS fix or like an active ping on a phone.
Okay. And again, you mentioned there are occasions where sometimes phone calls don't go to the nearest tower, they go to the tower that has the strongest connection with the cell phone?
That is correct.
We talked about the cell tower information that cell phone providers are able to log. Do they also log additional information about phone calls?
It's kind of carrier specific. So each carrier kind of has their own records retention as far as what they retain and how long they retain it.
Okay. But typically, do those companies store information with respect to the duration of phone calls?
Yes, they do.
Do they retain information with respect to numbers that are involved in the communication?
Yes, with the records that cell phone carriers generally provide, they'll have a start and a stop time to the call, who placed the call, both sides of the call as far as what numbers were connected to the call.
And they also identify the cell tower that was involved.
That's correct.
If you're analyzing records from a cell phone provider, and for instance, a phone call shows up on one phone's records but not another, are there sometimes instances where that wouldn't be logged?
Yes, so if you were comparing records for two separate numbers, that there was a phone call that you know was transmitted from one phone but doesn't show up on the other phone's call logs, there's a lot of variables that, you know, you'd have that scenario with a phone maybe not being actively powered on, a phone not having a connection to a cell phone tower. You know, there's a couple different things that come to mind when you're analyzing cell phone records from two different phones.
If a call is not answered on one party's phone, would an analysis of that party's phone necessarily show that call as having occurred? Can you
Repeat your question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding exactly what you're asking.
Sure, and I'm trying to understand this as well. So if a phone call is received or made to a party, but the call is not answered, would that necessarily show up as a call that was made on that person's cell phone?
From the person that placed the call?
From the person who received the call.
The person receives the call, but they do not answer it. It would show up in the records. It may not show up on the phone.
So you wouldn't, in that situation, be able to obtain a specific cell tower in which that phone linked up to for that call?
That is correct.
Okay. But there would still be a log with respect to a phone call as having been attempted?
Yes.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you have training experience with respect to mobile forensics.
That's correct.
Can you describe what that means?
The mobile forensics is extracting data from a cell phone device. There's a lot of information that can be extracted and analyzed from a cell phone. You know, the basic items that you will see are text messages, call logs, contacts, internet history, that type of stuff. Depending on the phone, you know, you could get a lot more different types of artifacts related to phone location, social media profiles, the applications that have been installed on that phone. There's a lot of variables with, you know, there's so many different types of phones, so it's kind of on a case-by-case basis of what you actually receive from a particular device.
Okay. And can you outline the training you've received with respect to conducting those examinations?
Yes, I have training specifically from the manufacturer of the software that we use to conduct those forensic examinations.
And what is that software?
It's Celebrate.
Okay. And that's a program that you have received training in utilizing?
Yes, I've been using Celebrate since 2014.
Since you began employment with the Sheriff's Office?
That's correct.
Does the age of a phone, or and what I mean by that is how old a phone is, affect the information that you'll be able to obtain from the phone?
Yeah, generally an older phone, it might not have, you know, the storage capacity or some of the capabilities of newer phones that are on the market today. So as far as what type of data can be extracted from those phones is generally limited.
Okay. And would it be fair to say, too, that the technology and the applications used to conduct those examinations has improved as we continue on?
Yeah, it's drastically improved.
Okay. So for instance, an examination done in 2013 looks a lot different than an examination done in 2021.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So first, directing your attention to, I guess, 2019, were you requested by Sergeant Ehrenstein to conduct analyses with respect to several phones, reference the investigation into the disappearance of Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes, I was.
Is it common in your employment that you are asked to assist in investigations from detectives?
Yes, pretty much on a daily basis.
Okay. You ultimately did conduct those examinations?
That's correct.
We'll first talk about the cell phone records that you examined. What sort of information were you provided?
I would have received records from the cell phone carrier, including call detail records for several different phones.
And do you recall which phones you were requested to conduct an analysis on?
As far as the records, I believe there was a phone, I believe all three of them were from Cellcom Records, Jim Prokopovitz, Wesley Edges, and I believe Victoria Prokopovitz as well. 3 separate sets of records.
And those were all from Cellcom?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And those are provided from Cellcom, the cell phone carrier, pursuant to subpoena?
Yes, that's correct.
And those are typically certified and then you analyze them yourself?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to, we've kind of been using a broad term, analyze, I guess, what sort of examinations are you doing with respect to the data that you receive from Cellcom?
The data that we used from Cellcom would have been used to create like a visual representation of where phones were during certain phone calls.
And again, you're also including in that the information with respect to times calls are made, durations, numbers involved, things like that?
Yeah, the time for each specific call would have been highlighted and referenced. Essentially, in analyzing the records, we create a visual map of where that phone would be, which tower it would be connected to, both sides of the call as far as who the call was placed by, who the call was received by, if there was any duration to the call, if it was answered or not answered.
And how are you able to, I believe your term was map, how are you able to map those calls?
We have a specialized software that we use that automates the correlation between specific phone calls and the geolocation of where specific cell phone towers are.
Is that, I guess, how are you able to determine, what cell towers are being referenced in those cell phone records?
Along with the records that we receive from Cellcom for the specific numbers, we also receive a listing of where Cellcom's equipment or their towers are located.
So included in the information that law enforcement receives from cell phone carriers is like a longitude, latitude of where that call or where that tower was located?
Yeah, we also would receive a spreadsheet of basically all their tower data. So the name of the tower, they usually have a numerical identifier for the specific tower, and then geographically, latitude and longitude where that tower is located, how the tower is laid out as far as the 3 sectors as well.
Okay, so you described the sectors earlier. Included in that information would also be which 120-degree sector was utilized in that call?
That's correct.
And that's all information that you're able to map?
Yes.
What is the program or application that you use to plot that information?
It's called CellHawk.
Okay. And is that a program that you're trained in utilizing?
Yes.
And that's the program that you utilized in conducting the analysis of the 3 phones that you referenced earlier?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Mr. Behling, did you subsequently prepare a report with respect to your findings?
Yes, I would have generated 3 separate reports.
Okay. And those are documents that you would have prepared?
Yes.
Mr. Behling, I'm showing you 3 exhibits, 85, 86, 87, First, with respect to Exhibit 85, do you recognize that?
Yes, this is my report on the analysis of the call detail records for the phone number 920-619-6958.
And through the course of your investigation, that was identified as James Prokopovitz's number?
That's correct.
Okay. Now showing you Exhibit 86, do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, this is a report I would have generated with the analysis of phone number 920-609-3448.
And that was a phone number that was identified as Victoria Prokopovitz's number?
That's correct.
I'm also showing you Exhibit 87. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, I do. This is my analysis on the records for phone number 920-619-0851.
And would that have been a number identified as Wesley Edges' phone number?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, all three of those are reports that you prepared in this case?
Yes, they are.
I'd move 85 through 87.
No objection, Your Honor.
85 through 87 are admitted.
I guess as a general overview, let's start with Exhibit number 85, Mr. Behling. And for the purpose of presenting these, Judge, I'd ask permission to publish as we go along with the witness.
You may.
Thank you.
Again, you're welcome to move the screen closer as long as Mr. D'Angelo knows exactly what document's on the screen. And do you have the ability to place that document on your computer then, Mr. D'Angelo?
Anything, Your Honor, I'll just move over. I can.
All right. Yeah. I guess that's good then, maybe. And jurors, if you still have a hard time, let me know. Maybe we can get it a couple feet more forward. Too far, then we lose Mr. D'Angelo and ability to see it.
Mr. Behling, we're looking at Exhibit 85, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically, there's a call.
All right. Take it closer, yeah. And, all right, that's, there'll be some point that Mr. Saunders won't be able to see it.
You can see it right there,
Oh, on the screen there? Okay. All right, very good.
So if you could turn to, there's a log, April 25, 2013, at 11:25 a.m.
Okay.
And what is the information with respect to this phone call?
11:25 a.m. on 4/25/2013, we have a 0.05-minute phone call from 920-619-6958, which was identified as James Prokopovitz. Call being placed to 920-609-3448, which is a number associated with Victoria Prokopovitz. That call goes to voicemail. It's routed through cell tower 331, sector X. The azimuth of that sector is 105 degrees. You can view on the visual map that there is essentially what looks like a piece of pie that represents the sector that call was routed through.
And we'll be seeing a lot of those green shaded areas, Mr. Behling. What does that information, I guess, indicate?
That is the 120-degree span of this particular sector that the call was routed through. It's directionally from the tower where the phone would actually be geographically in relation to the tower. It doesn't necessarily mean that the phone is within the shaded area. It can extend much further in that direction that the shaded area represents.
And that was going to be my next question. So there's I guess, an end to the green shaded area on the map, but we're not able to pinpoint exactly if it's within that green shaded area or not.
That's correct. With the way that cell phone technology works, we know directionally from the tower which direction they are. But based on the technology, like we discussed before, you're going to have a signal to whatever tower you have the best signal to. In a more densely populated area of towers, it's going to be more accurate than in a rural area where there's less tower selection. In an area like Green Bay where you have, multiple towers in a 1 square mile area, the proximity of the phone to the tower is going to be much closer than in a rural area where, you might have one tower every several miles.
Okay. So for instance, in this page and on this call, it's possible the call was much further out within that sector. However, if you go too far out, then it may be picked up by a different cell tower?
That's correct.
Okay. And essentially what you're saying is that's more prevalent in a densely populated area because there's a higher concentration of cell towers in that area?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that, I guess we'll call it a sector or the indication on where that phone call is hitting off of. Where is that in approximate to the location of Green Bay?
My copy is a little lightly printed. That tower appears to be somewhere on the west side of the river, downtown Green Bay area, possibly near Broadway, okay. Ashland area.
And again, when we're talking about these locations, what we're talking about is the cell tower itself and not necessarily the call itself.
That's correct. The small part of the sector is actually right on top of where the tower location is.
Okay. So the green sector area emanates from the cell tower and gives us the degrees that that call occurred within.
That is correct.
Okay. And with respect to this 11:25 a.m. call, the records that you reviewed indicated that call went to voicemail?
That is correct.
Okay. So it was not a call that would have been answered?
That is correct.
Then if you could turn to, there's a call April 25th, 2013 at 12:41 p.m.
April 25th, 2013, 12:41 p.m. It's 0.02 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-609-3448, which is Victoria Prokopovitz. That call goes to voicemail. That phone call used the tower cell 331, sector X. The azimuth of that sector is at 105 degrees. That's the same tower as the previous call.
And just for the record, I think you used the term azimuth. What does that mean?
That's the degree of 360 degree span that the center of the sector faces. So it allows you to calculate your 120 degree span from that center point.
Okay. And that would be consistent with the same cell tower as the previous call we discussed?
Same tower and same sector, yes.
Okay. And again, that call was not answered?
That call also goes to voicemail.
Okay. The next page, Mr. Behling, this is a call at 4:29 p.m. on that same date. What information was obtained with respect to this call?
4/25/2013, 4:29 p.m. We have an 8.5 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 800-531-5000, which is DirecTV. That call is answered by DirecTV. It's routed through cell tower 612, sector Z, that has an azimuth of 240 degrees. And then there's a location associated with that particular tower. Looks to be east of the Kunish-Anston area.
Okay. So again, we're looking at a different tower than the previous calls, is that fair?
Yes, different tower, completely separate tower.
Okay. And this one is up sort of north of Green Bay and east of Kunish and Anston?
That is correct.
Okay. The next call, Mr. Behling, at 4:50 p.m. What information was obtained with respect to this call?
At 4:50 p.m. on 4/25/2013, we have a 0.07 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-619-5675. And in comparing that number to pictures of James Prokopovitz's cell phone, that number is saved as a contact in that phone as Vicky. That call goes to voicemail.
Okay.
That particular tower is, again, cell tower. Actually, it's different than the previous call we discussed. This is cell tower 322, sector Z, azimuth at 240 degrees, and you'll have a location there as well. This tower is northeast of Pittsfield, Kunish area.
Okay. So a few things with this. The phone number that's being called in this case, first of all, it's a call from Mr. Prokopovitz to another phone number?
That is correct.
Okay. And that is a different phone number than the previous calls to Vicky that we discussed earlier?
It is a different phone number, yes.
That one ended in 3448, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But you also reviewed, I guess, extraction performed on Mr. Prokopovitz's phone, and that's where you're indicating it was a listed number for Vicky?
Just to be clear, it wasn't like a data extraction, kind of like we previously discussed. Back in 2013, when they looked at the phone, they took pictures with like a digital camera or another cell phone of the screen of his phone with the different contacts and call logs and that type of stuff.
Does that kind of relate to the state of the technology we discussed earlier?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Nowadays, there's a more sophisticated process in conducting phone analyses?
Yeah, we would create a copy of the entire data range of the phone. It just allows for better searching and analyzing of the data.
Okay. And again, this call occurred, or the cell tower involved, occurred north of that Kunish Road residence?
That's correct.
And again, you're not able to definitively say, based on these records, where within that sector that call occurred?
No, we just know directionally which way from the tower that the phone would be located.
Okay. And do the records indicate whether or not that phone call was answered?
That call also goes to voicemail.
We reviewed then in some, Mr. Behling, several phone calls made the afternoon of April 25th, 2013 from Mr. Prokopovitz's phone. Were there any phone calls you noted based on the records that were actually successful in terms of a conversation ensuing between Mr. Prokopovitz and Victoria?
No, I did not locate anything like that.
When was the next call that the records indicate occurred?
After the 4:50 p.m. call?
Yes.
I don't have anything else on 4:25.
So then the next one is at April 26, 2013 at 4:13 a.m.?
That is correct.
So between that 4:50 p.m. call that was not answered to 4:13 a.m. on the 26th, there were no calls made on the phone?
I don't have any other calls that were in the records from Cellcom for that particular number, no.
Okay. With respect to this call at 4:13 a.m., What information were you able to obtain with respect to that call?
It's a .02 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-609-3448, which is Victoria Prokopovitz. That call also goes to voicemail. Again, we're on tower 612, sector Z, with an azimuth of 240 degrees, and it displays the location of that tower. The particular sector we're connected to appears to point towards the Coonish-Anston area, with the tower being located east of there.
And again, this would be a phone number that ends 3448. That was identified to you as the phone number currently being utilized by Victoria at the
Yes,
time of her
it was.
disappearance? I'm sorry?
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay. And this call was unanswered as well?
That call also goes to voicemail.
Okay. The next call's at 5:08 a.m.
5:08 a.m. I have a 0-minute phone call from 920-619-6958, which is the number associated with James Prokopovitz, to 920-616-5675, which is again the number that was stored in the phone as Vicky. That call is unanswered. It's from cell tower 322, sector Z, azimuth at 240 degrees. And that tower again is northeast of the Coonish Road address.
And then there's a second call noted at 5:08 a.m. on the next page.
That's correct.
So both of these calls occurred at 5:08 a.m. Are they different calls?
Yeah, they are separate calls. One is at 5:08 and 21 seconds. The other one is at 5:08 and 46 seconds. So they are close in time, but they are separate calls. They are the two separate phone numbers, one to the 920-616-5675. And actually, I take that back. Both of these calls at 5:08 a.m. Are both unanswered. They're both from James Prokopovitz. They both go to the 619-5675 number, which is Vicky stored in the phone contact.
And both of those calls at 5:08 a.m. Were from, or I guess, connected to the same cell tower?
Same cell tower, same sector, yes.
But that is a different cell tower than the 4:13 a.m. call?
Yes, that is correct. It's separate cell tower than the 4:13 a.m. call.
But again, does that necessarily indicate those calls are made from different locations necessarily?
Not necessarily. Like I discussed before, depending on, if someone's on a separate room in the house, east or west, you could kind of be bouncing between both towers depending which one you have a strongest signal to. Proximity-wise, if they're close in distance, it's consistent with, being in the same location.
Okay. And then the next call after 5:08 a.m.
Uh, 4/26/2013, it's a 6:15 a.m. call. It's 0.13 minutes. This call is from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-621-5154. The call is answered. That particular tower is cell tower 331. Sector X was used for this call with an azimuth of 105 degrees. Geographic location of this tower is somewhere in the center of Green Bay on appears to be the west side of the river.
Okay. And in your report, you're attributing the 5154 number to an individual. Where is that information obtained from?
It would have come from our internal records keeping at the sheriff's office.
So, for instance, if an investigator speaks with an individual and identifies the phone number that individual uses, it's logged in your system and you're referencing that with analyzing these records?
That is correct.
Okay. And that is a call that's answered.
This call is indeed answered, yes.
The next call at 6:22 a.m.
On 4/26/2013, 6:22 a.m., I have a 0-minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-619-0851, which is listed as Wesley Edges. This call is not answered. We're on cell tower 331, which is the same cell tower as the previous call, except we're on a different sector of the tower. We're on sector Y, and has an azimuth of 225 degrees.
Okay. And that phone call is unanswered?
That is correct. It's unanswered.
There are then several phone calls that you identified as occurring in the next few minutes. Mark Blazer, John Hill, Mark Blazer, and Stephen Hilliker. Those all occurred in approximately the same area of Green Bay, or at least same cell towers are involved.
Yeah, all generally in the same relative area, yes.
Okay. Then looking at 7:02 a.m.
7:02 a.m., I have a 0.02 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-619-0851, which is Wesley Edges. This call goes to voicemail. Again, we're on cell tower 331, sector X, which is in the center of Green Bay on the west side.
And then 7:06 a.m.
7:06 a.m., another call from James to Wes. It's 0.02 minutes. This call also goes to voicemail. We are now on a different tower. We're on tower 308, sector Y, with an azimuth of 120 degrees. This tower is in the vicinity of Lambeau Field on the west side of Green Bay.
And so there was a call at 7:02 and 7:06 to a number identified as Mr. Edges' phone number?
That's correct.
Okay. Then after 7:06 a.m. for the rest of the morning, was there any call noted to Mr. Edges in that time frame?
It'll just take me a second to review.
Sure.
On the morning of the 26th, no, after those previous calls, there wasn't any further calls to Wesley.
Okay. And what about to Victoria's number ending 3448? I'll ask the same question after the 4:13 a.m. call.
To the 3448 number, no, there wasn't any further calls.
In that same time frame, there were calls that were noted to that 5675 number. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that was, I guess, the number we discussed earlier that was previously utilized by Victoria?
Yes, that's the number that was saved in the phone under Vicky.
But no further calls to the 3448 number?
That's correct.
Then looking at 1:03 p.m. on that same date, what information was obtained with respect to that call?
On 4/26/2013 at 1:03 p.m., we have a 9.93 minute call from 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-391-7450, which is the Brown County, Wisconsin Public Safety Communications Center. This call is answered. It's from cell tower 612, sector Z, which is a tower to the east of the Coonish Road address.
And you identify this phone number that is being called as the Brown County, essentially non-emergency dispatch.
Yes, that's correct.
And the cell tower that call is connecting with, making that call, is again now up north of Green Bay, out by Coonish.
That's correct.
And it was a approximately 10-minute phone call?
Roughly 10 minutes, just under.
And I don't know if we discussed this. When we're talking about the phone records that we're looking at, there are periods where there's no activity logged in between phone calls. Is that correct?
Specific to the records from Cellcom?
Yes.
That's correct.
So are there instances where, as an analyst, you're able to essentially see a timeline of a phone's movement, either GPS or Wi-Fi connectivity, that you're able to track the phone on a continuous basis?
On some of the newer smartphone devices, yeah, that is forensically capable.
Okay. The records we're referring to are merely records that are logged when a phone call is made.
That's correct. These are records direct from the carrier. It's not any data that's actually physically extracted from the device.
So if there are, for instance, we saw a gap between 4:50 p.m. on April 25 to 4:13 a.m. on April 26, that gap in time, what does that indicate to you?
As far as these records that were analyzed, it just means that there was no calls to and from that number.
In that time frame?
In that time frame, yes.
Okay. Then we'll jump ahead to April 27th, 2013. At 7 in the morning, 7:10 a.m.
April 27th, 2013, 7:10 a.m. A 0.37 minute call from 920-619-6958. The number identified as James Prokopovitz, to 920-598-0725. This call is answered. It's from cell tower 331, sector X, with an azimuth of 105 degrees. It's located kind of centrally within Green Bay on the west side of the river.
And that is a phone call that records would indicate was made to a Mark Blazer.
That's correct.
And that call was answered.
Yes, it was.
Okay. And I'm sorry to jump you around here. I did forget one call I wanted to reference. We could go back to April 26, 2013, 1:57 p.m.
Uh, 4/26/2013, 1:57 p.m. There was a 0-minute phone call from 920-69 920-619-6958, which is James Prokopovitz, to 920-468-0632. This call is not answered. Again, we're on cell tower 612, Sector Z, has an azimuth of 240 degrees. This is the tower located east of the Coonish Road address.
And again, this call was at 1:57 p.m., so that is after the previous call we discussed that was made to the Brown County non-emergency line,
Yes, that's correct.
about 54 minutes after.
54 minutes from start of the phone call to the communication center. It lasts roughly 10 minutes. And then the following call at 1:57, yes.
Okay. Prior to this call at 1:57 p.m. on April 26th, did you note any other calls to the number you identified as being Stacey Deers?
No, I don't believe so.
In that same time frame, did you note any calls to Marshall Loritz?
No, I did not.
And we discussed that there were no calls to Wesley Edges after 7:02 a.m.
Correct.
And no calls to Victoria's active phone number after 4:13 a.m.
That's correct.
Okay. We'll then move to Exhibit 86.
Judge, we do have a fair amount of other records to go through. Does the court want to break for lunch or keep going through?
How long do you think your additional direct will take?
Maybe a half an hour?
Probably a half hour across. All right, we can take a lunch break then. All right, jurors, standard admonition, don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Enjoy your 1 hour for lunch. Anything we need on the record outside the presence of the jurors?
No.
All right, then we're, court's in recess till 1 o'clock. You may step down.